Minute up. Good evening. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Aldermen to order on Monday, June 17, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Nashua High School North Auditorium. The prayer will be offered by Alderman Moran. The prayer will be offered by the City Clerk. Alderman Moran, would you be so kind as to lead us in the pledge to the flag?
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty to manage the affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding, which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, please.
Alderman O'Brien. Alderwoman Timmons.
Yeah, your mic's not working.
Alderman Moran. Here. Alderman Thibodeau. Here. Alderman Govea. Here. Alderman Lopez. Here. Alderman Sullivan. Here. Alderman Clemens. Alderman Sennett. Here. Alderman Jetty. Here. Alderman Tebow. Alderman Clee. Here. Alderman Dowd. Present. Alderwoman Kelly. Here. Alderman Wilshire.
Here.
11 present, 4 absent.
Thank you. Also joining us this evening is Mayor Donchis and Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. Oh, and we also have CFO Tax Collector Treasurer John Griffin.
We'll run through these slides.
As customary, I will turn the meeting over to Alderman Dowd, the Chair of the Budget Review Committee.
Okay, good evening. This evening's budget public hearing will follow the following procedures in order of accounts discussion. First, the Mayor will provide an overview of his FY 2025 budget, providing his thoughts on the various aspects of the proposed FY 2025 budget. When the Mayor concludes his remarks, the Chairman will open the microphone for those who wish to provide their overall opinion on the budget. Please respect others' time and try to adhere to these guidelines. You may ask the Mayor and CFO general budget questions. The Chairman will then open the discussion for each succeeding division, and questions may be asked on that portion of the budget only at that time. Members of the public may approach the microphone and clearly provide their name, address, and Nashua, followed by any questions they have on that portion of the budget. When they have concluded, they will be asked to return to their seat and may not ask any more questions about that portion of the budget at the time. So please ask all your questions about that portion of the budget when you come up. There will be a chance to add any questions you may have forgotten at the end. If there's no one here to answer them from the city, we will get back to you. When everyone has had their opportunity to ask questions about that portion of the budget, we will move on to the next division for questions. Again, if you discover you have any additional questions about a portion of the budget that's already been discussed, you may ask them at the conclusion, and we will get you an answer if there's no one here to answer it. Divisions that we've covered in the following sequence: General Government, which is the Mayor's Office, Board of Aldermen, Legal Department, and City Clerk; Office of Civic, Emergency Management, and Energy Management. Then Other General Government, Hunt, Parking, Economic Development, followed by Public Safety Fire, then Public Safety Police, Public Health, Administrative Services, Public Library, Community Development, Public Works and Engineering, and Financial Services, including surf, hydrants, street lighting, debt service, contingency, and then Education. Please be respectful of all city employees. This hearing is to ask questions that you might have regarding the FY25 budget. I'll now turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd, and thank you to our board and all of our citizens for coming today, our city employees. I'm glad to see so many city employees here who work very hard on behalf of the citizens of Nashua, and so I and many people appreciate them very much. So tonight we're going to do an overview of take a look at last year's budget and this year's, and then we'll go on to the agenda as Alderman Dowd outlined. So here we go. First, we're going to review fiscal year 24. Now, that's the year we're in now that ends June 30. Our new fiscal year begins, of course, on July 1. Last year, the current year that we're in, the general fund budget, as you see, was around $317 million. There was a 4.4% increase over the previous year, and the increase in the tax rate was only 0.9 or less than 1%. Now, the Board of Aldermen had reviewed and knew what happened with the state-mandated revaluation that occurred a couple of years ago, and we know that worked hardship for some homeowners, so we wanted to keep the next year's rate up, make it go up as little as possible, so to sort of even things out. So last year the tax rate went up less than 1%. Some of the things that have happened in recent years, in 2023, the city, Nashua, was ranked by Wallet Hub as the number one, the safest city in America. In October 22, we'd been the second safest. And this was based on an evaluation of 182 of the largest U.S. cities using many different metrics, much of which has to do with, some of which has to do with the crime rate. Other factors have to do with financial safety and other criteria, a lot of detail. You'd need to look at the analysis in detail. But I want to thank our police and fire departments for contributing to this number one safest city, because certainly they play a big part of it, and the people who work for both of those departments do a great job in helping to keep the community safe. We also received in 2024, this was just a few weeks ago, the 4th best run city in America. It's largely based upon an analysis of the efficiency of city services, in other words, the quality of services versus the cost. We scored very highly, of course, because the system we have keeps the budget very tight. Again, this was an evaluation of 149 cities. Our overall rank was number 4, quality of services number 3. Smallest budget per capita was 13 out of 149 cities. We also, in 2024, of course, this year, we're in the top 100 best places to live across the country. We'd also received that designation in 2023. This is based upon an evaluation of 2,000 cities with populations between 75,000 and 500,000, using many metrics, which you can see in various categories, which you can see on the slide. We scored most highly in education, in our amenities, and in safety and health. Now let's go on to take a look at the current budget, the one we'll be talking about tonight. The overall general fund budget is nearly $349 million. There are also enterprise funds, which are wastewater, that is the sewage treatment plant, and all of the sewers and work that goes on with respect to them, and which is paid for not by taxes but by the sewer user charges, as well as the landfill or solid waste budget. Those two enterprise funds total $55 million, and you see that figure on the slide. Now, the Looking at the budget, the overall needs include our salaries and benefits. Most of the budget, 70% about, is salaries and benefits for the city employees. City is a service organization. This includes, of course, teachers, police, fire, city hall, library, etc. We've certainly been affected by the global inflation that has affected the cost of many different goods, particularly those relating to infrastructure. We always face state and county mandates, which we pay the county about $13–14 million a year. We could talk forever about all the things that the state of New Hampshire has done to raise property taxes, but we won't get into that now. And as you see at the bottom, the fiscal year budget, the proposed budget that is being now considered by the Board of Aldermen and the Budget Committee, the increase from the previous year is 3.7%. And this shows you the cost of one of our most significant challenges, which is the cost of benefits, principally health insurance for city employees. You see the increase was 9% for the current year from fiscal 23, and the increase for this coming year is 13%. This is typical. I think Manchester's was 16 or higher. Cost of medical care is going up everywhere. We have taken various steps to try to moderate this cost. We did some plan design changes a few years ago, which sort of flattened the rate of increase out for a few years. We've also encouraged as many employees as we possibly can to enter or join the high deductible plan, which many employees have joined because it provides them a lot of benefits as well, because they can save money, and the details of that are too much to go into right now, but they can save money and build up a personal account that they can take with them or later if they retire or leave city employment. This just shows you some of the categories of general categories where the money is spent. Schools, always the largest number. You can see it's 54 or 55% overall. Police and fire come next, our safety services. Debt service is $22 million out of the $339. Sometimes people assume incorrectly that, oh my God, we're borrowing so much money that this is just driving up the taxes. Actually, as you can see, the proportion of money paid for debt service is principal and interest on money borrowed or outstanding bonds. It constitutes about 6 or 7%. When you put it all together, schools, everything, it's about 6 or 7% of the city budget. Department of Public Works, it is $15 million, next behind police and fire, and then the other categories, library, city hall, other things, total about $47 million. Again, you can see, this is another slide that breaks out the overall expenditure, the overall appropriations, salaries and wages, the biggest amount. Fringe benefits adds to the cost of employees. You can see the debt service again, that's the principal and interest is $22 million a year. And then various other expenses are really a smaller proportion of the budget. We were going to run through a few of the maybe most notable changes for the proposed budget. One thing we wanted to do was to make sure that firefighters have regular cancer and health screenings because studies show that firefighters get certain diseases caused by their exposure to hazardous substances more commonly than other people. So one goal is to try to detect those illnesses early and therefore head them off whenever possible. So that is something we added to the budget. Again, we're just focusing here, I mentioned before that the cost of the health insurance went up 13%. That's $4.6 million. More money went into transit, and the reason for that is because of basically cutbacks on the federal level. So the question comes up, well, if we cut a couple of routes, does that proportionately reduce the expenditures, the city expenditures, or the local expenditures we have to make? And the answer is really no. I mean, because there's so many fixed costs that if you cut a route, you might save, we'd have to ask the transit manager or Matt Sullivan, but it's, minimal, $20,000, $30,000. So it's really not that productive to try to reduce service, because the benefit of that, the economic benefit really doesn't amount to a whole lot as compared with the whole city budget. We are continuing with 4 community health workers who previously were grant funded. These are people who reach out to the homeless, unsheltered population in the city, which of course we've seen grow over recent years, as it has in all across the country, across the state. And we have found that if they get to know and work with certain individuals, that we can make progress with some, get some people into treatment, into housing, find them IDs, things they need for employment. And so we are continuing those because we have found the work effective. There's a cybersecurity engineer. You might recall that there was a breach of the IT system in the school department, which came out better than it could have, but it still cost a lot of money. And so this is someone who's going to focus exclusively on trying to make sure that our systems are not penetrated again by out of nation hackers. The guy who did it, we think, was a Russian organization. There's a housing services officer for the first time. This person works with the community health workers to address the issues of homelessness and the unsheltered people in Nashua. And finally, there is a community co-responder in the Nashua Police Department. This was grant funded. We're continuing that as well because the police department has found that this is a very effective tool in terms of just making their law enforcement efforts more effective. This is a trained social worker who, when called upon by the PD or by the officers involved, responds to non-criminal situations where people are upset, and there could be a variety of different circumstances, but where a uniformed officer doesn't necessarily help defuse the situation, but could exacerbate it. So we now have Leah Elliott, who has been working in the police department for 6 months or so, and the PD has found that as a very effective resource. So we are continuing that with local funds, as at least proposed in the budget. And thank you very much. We will go on to the public hearing portion of the evening. Again, thank you everybody for coming and for your interest in Nashua.
Before we go any further, Alderman O'Brien, would you make a motion to take the R23-125 off the table? I'm sorry. Yeah. This year's budget off the table.
Point of order for the record. Alderman O'Brien is present now. He wouldn't have to roll call.
We didn't have to do a roll call anyway. We're bringing it off the table.
When attendance was called.
Oh, we logged him in.
Just for the record.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to take the FY 2025 budget off the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, As I mentioned, the first items to be discussed, does anyone have any opinions on the overall budget? They may come up and to the microphone, give their name and address in Nashua.
Laura Cahoon, 30 Greenwood Drive. First of all, Mayor, I think if you go over your figures, you will find that the actual budget increase is 7.13. Okay, I've been doing these research since 2015. I've done them the same way forever. And if you look, you're giving, general fund is having 14% increase. Administrative services is getting 24.80%. Public safety is going up 11%. Public health is going up 38%. Community development is going up 14%. Debt service is up 12%. So all these figures that was in your book is a 7.14%, not your 3.7. So I think you better review your figures. Thank you.
All right, well, I don't agree with that, but, I mean, we have our CFO working on the budget, but the reason that the administrative services budget is particularly up is because that's where the health insurance is allocated.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. You know, just to make it clear, obviously, the calculation is done for the budget differently than we understand. And based on the math that you did, you put up that 2024 was 316 million and change. 2025 is 339 million and change. The difference of that is 22 million and change divided by last year's number of 316 and change comes out to 7.13. That's just a simple math. And that's just using your numbers up there for 2024 versus projected next year. So obviously, that calculation is done differently. Now, I was on a budget committee in Litchfield, and we just used the numbers from last year to this year. And you could do the math and it made sense. But what are you taking out or what are you excluding? Because obviously there's something different there. Can you just, and it's not, I just want to understand how you did the number.
During the year, there were a number of supplemental appropriations. And those are, and this is the procedure we've used, you know, for some years now, but the supplemental appropriations are included because actually that was money allocated, appropriated, and spent during fiscal '24. So when you include the supplemental appropriations, you come up with the 3.7%.
And then our
And maybe we should have included those in the number of the base budget, but it's not there, so that's the difference.
And are benefits in there too? Like the benefit shift difference, is that included as well?
By benefit shifting, you mean?
I mean, the benefit changes for employees, are benefits counted in there as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to see, you know, the supplemental that goes in included, because then we know. Obviously, there's about 10 million of supplemental that must have gone in to cut that from 7.13 down to 3 point whatever.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I've been calculating that number since the spending cap went back into place. You take the budget that was adopted last year, and as the mayor indicated, you add the $10.6 million of supplemental.
Okay.
Because essentially you're increasing the adopted budget. One minus the other is the 3.7. But we also can provide the amount of worksheet, which I use to calculate, that have the total amount of the supplementals. General fund, 10.6 million.
Okay, thank you. And you gave a summary of notable position changes, and it showed, I think, maybe 6 positions, but one of them, it looked like the police department position is grant funded, and that's continuing as a grant fund. So it looks to me like there are maybe 5 new notable positions. What are those were notable, is how they were labeled. What is the total number of new positions coming into this budget? Do you know?
Well, there's more than the 5 because in the police department there are about 4. I mean, you can ask them specifically when they're, but it's 4 or 5 civilian positions that were added. at their suggestion. In the fire department, there was one position added, but you can ask them about the details. Those are the, and in the school department, the total number of employees is not going up, I don't believe. So those are, give you some sense of it.
Okay, and what about City Hall for the, administrative services and all the departments? Because the health service would be in there with the 4. The one other position that was mentioned would be there. The granted position was police department, but within City Hall, it looked like the notable positions you listed were from City Hall, the 5. How many additional positions are there being allocated for City Hall? Do you know?
You're going to have to ask administrative services when they come up.
Okay, you don't have a total. Thank you.
Anyone else with general comments about the overall budget?
Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson, and I live at 15 Westbourne Drive. I think the house is still here in Nashua. I've got some questions here about this budget. This is more like a summary book. It doesn't break everything down. So if I wanted to say, hypothetically, get the wage of Administrative Services Director Tim Cummings, where would I see his wage?
It's in the supplemental information in the back.
In the back? I couldn't find it. So every director and every manager's salary is broken down by line item with their name on it, the way it used to be?
It's salaries and wages is on page 272.
272.
I mean, generally speaking, we've tried to improve the accessibility of the budget, and you can say transparency. I mean, it used to be that all you'd get is just a bunch of numbers. Now we're trying to, we within the budget are explaining what each department does, additional information. We're trying to explain to people who live here what the money is going for and what the different departments do. So I believe overall the budget is far more accessible and understandable than it used to be.
Well, I guess my question is, continued here, is that normally when you go into that department, you like to see the salaries of everybody listed. So this way you can calculate it into what the budget is going to be, then separate it out. And I've done many budgets in the past, a lot of budgets. And I find that this is a little bit harder to understand because you got all the salaries back here when I'm looking for it really up front in that department.
Well, I don't agree with that. I mean,
Well,
if
you
you
don't
look,
have to agree with me, Mayor. You really don't have to.
If you want me to answer, you have to not interrupt me. So, if you start on page 272 and you go through page, I mean, it's a lot of pages, page 283, you will see that there are many salaries that are and wages that are listed. So I think if you just turn to that section of the budget, you will find out what various people make.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else? Excuse me, you've already spoken. You can't speak again.
I'd like to correct the record on something because
No, you
Mr.
can't
Griffin
speak
said
a
something
second
about
time.
supplemental in expenses. I have 2324 here. There has never been supplemental expenses put in any of these budgets. So if you want this, I'll gladly give it to you. You can see. It's exactly the same format I did for 2425. No supplemental has ever been put in the budget. Please correct your records.
If you have something, you could give it to the legislative assistant.
Who's
She's
that?
right there. Anyone else with general comments about the overall budget?
Hi, my name is Christine McKinley, 6 Southgate Drive. I just have sort of a question, but a comment. I've said pretty much the same thing almost every year, and you made note that 70% of the budget is salary and benefits, so I think it's important that it's understood how it's determined, how much people are getting paid. And I don't know if Alderman Timmons is here tonight? No. Well, I was hoping she would be because we had quite a conversation at the end of the budget meeting last time and a disagreement, and that's fine. I just wanted to come this time prepared to explain why the idea that city employees are being paid such high levels of benefits is based on the fact that they are paid less than private industry employees. And this I've brought so that I can pass it out. This is 2024 release from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it very clearly indicates that is not the case. It hasn't been the case in probably 40 years or 50. And so what should have happened decades ago to balance out what taxpayers are providing for city and any kind of government employees, once their salaries had begun to stabilize at a level comparable to a private industry employee, everything else should, all of the extras should not have continued to grow at a pace that's faster than the people that are paying for them. And each year I come and ask, why is it that people who work for industries that made decisions decades ago to say, you know, these benefits are no longer sustainable, we need to do something differently. The only entities that haven't done that are the government, whether it's federal government, state government, or our city government. But the people who are paying for all of the government employees to have these extra benefits have had to continue to pay them in spite of the fact that they don't have them themselves. So I wanted to make sure that everyone here had an opportunity to look at what I see, and you can find online, but I brought you a part of it, and on the bottom of the second page, and I will plan to send this via email to the group, but the new one will be released tomorrow. But this is actually, I guess, 2023. 2024 is released tomorrow, but at least you'll know what's available for you to look at. And on the back page, I guess the reason I added the information about the schools, in private industry, you get a bonus or a raise or something based on performance, not because you've been there another year, not because it's sort of just built in, not because taxpayers manage to keep supporting you. It has to do with performance. So when I saw this year's release from U.S. Business Review, and I've been following this for decades, every year they review schools all the way across the country, and it was kind of appalling to see, here's Nashua High School North, and 26%, well actually they said 34%, but it was so appalling, I thought, wow, I'm gonna look at Nashua's own statistics, and the New Hampshire Department of Education was even worse. It was 26% of people were mathematics proficiency. There's hardly any of these that are above 50%, many of them in the 30s or 40%. So when I look at the continual increases and the percentage of our budget that is for education, those increases should be based on performance, should be based on the fact that we have people doing really well. And if they're not, why are we increasing people's salary? I mean, how do you get people to do a better job if when they don't do a good job, they get a salary increase? Makes no sense. So I'm going to make sure everybody has a chance to look at this. I'm going to be forwarding the one that's released tomorrow via email, and hopefully that will be helpful as you're deciding on how to spend our money.
Is there anyone else that has comments about the overall city's budget?
Just a quick comment slash question about the debt of the city. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sean Rogers, 26 Coburn Avenue. So I'm not an accountant. I have a hard time like leafing through tons of confusing Byzantine numbers that sometimes lead to confusing places I'm not very much used to. And what I'd like to see is, if possible, just sort of a breakdown of the cost overruns and of the debt, because that's never been very clear to me. And it's not clear by looking at the budgets that I've seen in the past, and I've even had multiple aldermen tell me that it's confusing to them, and if it's confusing to them, it's probably confusing to at least 90% of the general population. And so that is what I would like to do. And I think it would actually help relations a little bit in terms of what people are fighting about, because one group of people says that we're actually in this much debt because of the way people are calculating things, and the other group, supposedly minimizes it. I don't know what the truth is, but I think a little bit more, Mayor, you had said that we're being very transparent, and that may be true, but it always has a, what would you say, like there's always a calculation, how that calculation is made, that paints that picture, if that makes sense. So,
Well, there really should not be any dispute about what the city owes, because these are publicly advertised and voted on numbers that are reflected beginning on page 248 of the budget. And it tells you exactly how, when a bond was issued, meaning when a loan was secured, and how much has been paid off and how much is remaining. And you just add up the figures, and you come to, the total.
does it also put the cost overruns in as well?
Is it what?
The cost overruns, like when you basically get charged more than you were anticipating.
Well, now, I'm not familiar with I'm familiar with Picasso, the artist, but not the software, whatever it is, but...
Oh, cost overruns?
Oh,
Sorry.
cost overruns.
Yeah. I'll enunciate better for you.
The city cannot spend money that is not authorized, and everything is authorized publicly. So if there were a cost overrun, there would need to be a supplemental appropriation, more money appropriated, voted on. If there were a cost overrun, and I'm not saying there has been, but if there were, it would be, it would be reflected in the total debt figures. So there isn't money spent on bonds, borrowed money that isn't reflected in the budget.
Okay. In my experience, though, people don't usually try to, character assassinate people based on nothing. So where do you think, though, the difference in opinions comes from, the actual budget?
I have no idea. But you need to just look at I don't know what people who say these figures aren't correct, what are the right figures, and what's your evidence that they're wrong?
I didn't say they were wrong.
Just look at, no, I didn't say you did.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Just start on page 248 and just look. You can see every debt that the city has incurred for the last 20 years, usually 20, 30 years, and where we stand with respect to each. We call it a bond issue, but it's really a loan with respect to each bond issue. And these are principally infrastructure spending. Sometimes a fire truck. Sometimes we've bonded some very expensive fire equipment, $1 million plus for a single engine. But sewers, street paving, other things like this. Schools, this is where most of the money goes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And also the landfill. We have to spend money there to meet regulations and expand it. There's been quite a bit of money going into that, but
Oh, sorry, one follow-up question.
Yes.
The federal funds that come into the city, those are not included in the budget, or they are?
generally not.
Not, okay. All right.
Any other general comments on the budget? Seeing no one, will move into the first area. You can ask questions on this area, and please, you can come up once and ask all your questions on this area. And if there are any left over at the end, you can wait till the end, and we'll have follow-ups. So the first is general government. This is the mayor's office.
Can I just correct one thing from the last gentleman? The federal funds we receive aren't necessarily included in these departments, but there is a place in the budget where you can see what the grants are. We'll give you that page number in a moment, anyway.
But on the 300 and some $million, that's not in there, so the actual number is higher, correct?
The actual number is higher if you include the federal money, yes, but we're focused more on local taxes and what the local people are paying for. So if you look at page 22, you can find a lot of it. But that, for example, Title I schools, I don't believe those expenditures, the Title I funds that come in to the Title I schools, those are not reflected in the school budget.
All right, again, the general government's the mayor's office, board of aldermen, legal department, city clerk's office, civic emergency management, civic emergency management, energy management. Okay, that can be found on page 29 in the hard copy book, page 87, the electronic. Are there any questions in that area? Yes? If you print it out, that's why I said the electronic page. So they are different. Yeah.
And the page numbers I'm giving are to the printed volume.
Laura Cahoon, 30 Greenwood Drive. I'm looking at the general, and the Board of Aldermen is up 32.88%, legal's up 8.47%, city clerk's office is up 8.35%, civic and community activities is up 9.89%, parking enforcement is up 40.78%, parking operations is up 27%, and economic is up 23.42%. That's a total of 14% for the general. Where does that even come close to the 3.7 you're talking about?
Well, the 3.7 is the overall budget.
Yes, but I thought you gave a dictatorship that everybody should stay within 4%.
I did, yes.
Obviously, they didn't listen.
Well, some of the, I'm not sure about your numbers.
Can
I
you,
mean, I'm not
it's
looking
from
at-
the book, it's from the book. Can you
All right,
explain why the
but-
parking went up 40%? Are we going to get somebody now on Saturday and Sunday to give out tickets?
Yes, because that is a revenue producer, and we haven't had a full staff there. But I mean, often when you've given the numbers, I haven't, they, at least in our opinion, have not been correct. But, so I'd have to look at your
Well, I gave
calculations.
the
If you could
clerk-
submit your calculations.
I gave the clerk my calculations.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions on general government and the
My name is Bill Ferrio. My home is number 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a question about page 9 and the 3.7% in the first paragraph. I couldn't find anywhere in the book two numbers, 2024, 2025, a delta between them that calculated to 3.7%. Where is that 3.7% in this book? Where are the two numbers that you did the math on that comes out to 3.7%?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
the calculation of that information is not in the book, it's in the resolution, the backup to the resolution.
Why is it not in the book?
We've never put it in the book.
Well, how do you know that the 3.7 is correct?
If you look at the information that's included in the resolution.
So the resolution shows those two numbers, 2024,
Yeah, it shows the two numbers, and
and it shows the delta, and the delta is indeed 3.7%?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, maybe it should be in the book, but the resolution is the legal paperwork that is
I understand, but
submitted
you know what? It's
for the Board of Aldermen to pass.
the first paragraph in your letter, the very beginning of the book, talks about 3.7%.
Correct.
Why wouldn't you have that front and center in the book, how that was calculated? Okay.
I take
can
the
you not
point,
have that
yes.
in there?
We could print the resolution as part of the budget.
Okay.
We could include that as a page in the budget book.
I don't know
the
why you
budget
wouldn't. The other kind of general government question I had was on page 272, or starting on page 272, the FTEs are listed. So my question is, are you fully staffed to this level now, Mayor, or do you plan to staff up or de-staff to this level, or?
Your question is, are all these positions filled?
Are you staffed to this level to work to this budget? These number of FTEs is based on this budget.
Yes,
So you have to have this many people in these positions
yes.
to work to this budget. So the question is, are you staffed to these levels right now? Or are you staffed above that or below that?
Or
Or
we cannot go above it, but there are certain areas of the city government where we're understaffed. Police is down, they can tell you, but it varies. 20 officers. I see the chief nodding. 25, it's somewhere in that range. Fire department has been down to some extent, but now they're up fully staffed. There are other positions that from time to time can't be filled, and so they're reflected in the budget, but they're not actually being paid. For example, in the school department, paras, they've had trouble finding paras. So there are various areas of the city where the staff, these show you the authorized positions in the budget, but sometimes they have trouble finding the people to fill them.
so you would say in general you're understaffed to this budget today?
In certain areas, yes.
Yeah, understaffed, okay. And do you typically look at a staffing per month? Do you know what your staffing per month needs to be for the 12 months of the 2025 budget?
Yes, I mean, the major areas where there is, the large departments, of course, employ the vast majority of people. So I can tell you that Chief Rourke knows exactly how many police officers they're down. So he reviews that on more than a monthly basis. I would say he's doing that on a daily basis. In a place like City Hall, where there are many departments and there are less, but there are less employees. Yeah, we are aware if there's a position that's not filled, but and we're aware when it becomes filled. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on general government? The mayor's office, Board of Aldermen, legal department, city clerk's office, civic emergency management, energy management.
Lori Ortolano. Couple things. First of all, I would like you next year to have a total staffing count, an increase for each department, because I hate to have to come up all night long and ask every issue, every time, what's the increase instead of the notable ones. It just seems like such a waste of time. So first of all, are there any staffing increases in all of these areas you just outlined? Can somebody answer that question?
Which areas we outlined?
The departments I'm allowed to speak on right here and now. There's a whole long list. Could you read the list?
Mayor's office, Board of Aldermen, legal department, city clerk's office, civic emergency management, and energy management.
I don't believe in those areas there are additional employees.
Okay, energy management didn't take on anyone new?
Pardon?
Energy management doesn't take on anyone new?
No.
Okay. Is the clerk's office, what's happening with moving the right-to-know administrator to the clerk's office. Is that going to happen?
The right-to-know administrator works for administrative services.
I know, but he's not accessible to any of the people because he's behind a locked door with no phone number and doesn't communicate with anyone. And his whole purpose is to get information to the public. And any other municipality I know that carries that position has it in the clerk's office where they're accessible to the public.
Well, I don't know, Ms. Ortolano. I know that these issues have been raised in the many, a dozen lawsuits you brought against the city. So most of that has been dealt with in the courts. They've generally found that the city, having produced to you over 100,000 documents, is meeting our legal obligations, and that's our principal concern.
Well, you've skirted the question completely because I've never taken to the court the issue of Gary Perrin working in the Administrative Services Office versus in the clerk's office because it's not a legal question that I could
Correct.
present to a judge.
And so our judgment is that's the best place for him.
Okay, you didn't have to do your little song and dance to get to that answer. That answer would have been just
I was
fine.
simply answering your song and dance.
I've asked this and at numerous
All right.
meetings and no one responded. And there's no need to get snarky about it. I just wanted an answer.
Okay.
I want to address the Board of Aldermen when it comes to, is the Board of Aldermen a department in the budget? They're considered a department? Okay.
Yes.
And do they get paid by W-2 as like employees of the city?
Yes.
Okay. I want to address just briefly some of the concerns with right-to-know issues involving communications with the Board of Aldermen, because that's a cost item that I can tell, as the mayor has just said, I've had a dozen lawsuits, and that one is before the court right now pending a decision, but I do want to make the Board of Aldermen aware of something. I have tried in the past to communicate directly to Board of Aldermen members that serve as chairs of various standing committees. My communications have gone to Lori Wilshire, Shoshana Kelly, Rick Dowd, and Alderman O'Brien. Rick Dowd for Budget Committee, Alderman O'Brien for PEDC, Shoshana Kelly and Lori Wilshire, I think, for the new Housing Trust Fund Committee. And when I sent my right-to-knows to those board chairs, I was ignored. Actually, in fairness to Alderman O'Brien, he responded to me the first time I sent it, and then the second time I sent a question, it was ignored. And I couldn't figure out why board members would not respond to me on a request chairs. And I learned in a very convoluted way that the opinion of the legal department was that board members don't represent the public body. They are individuals, and as such, they don't have a requirement under RSA to respond to a citizen. Now, I think that's in violation of your practice of how departments are handled. The Board of Aldermen is very unique in that it is a department of the budget. It's essentially an agency like the mayor's office. When I send you, Mayor Donchis, a request, you give it, you don't not respond, you give it to your staff and you respond. You're an elected official that has an office. The Board of Aldermen are all elected, and they too have an office with 2 legislative assistants. And I think it's very bad practice and policy for anyone to say to Board of Aldermen members, you get to pick and choose and discriminate against who you want to respond to. You can not respond to this lady because you don't like her, but if your friend reaches out to you, yeah, by all means respond to her. And I have been very fixated and focused on policy, and the court has too. That's something they have recommended, that the city put together written, clear policies and post them on your website. And you had a policy, you have a policy on your website right now for right to know, and it's buried under citizen service requests. And when I went to court and I questioned Celia Leonard, Tim Cummings, and others on the stand, Mr. O'Brien, about how right to knows are handled through the citizen service request, they didn't even know about it. They didn't know it existed. And what citizen service request says is, you know, you can find all kinds of requests or issues here. What kinds of things can I send to the Service Request Center? Anything you think that the city of Nashua may be able to help you with. You can take a common request from a drop-down list or do a general inquiry. You can ask for records or information. How long does it take when I submit my request? That depends on the nature. All requests will be routed to the correct department within 1 business day. From there, you can expect to be contacted with the information within a timely fashion. How do I know my request hasn't been forgotten? It says we have a system of accounting, we issue a unique ticket number, and then it says, how will I know my request is sent to the right place? Our city staff has been trained to make sure that all requests are sent to the proper department. Even if you don't know where to send the request, our inquiry you can rest assured that we know. Now, I tried to use this. I used the Citizen Request Center, and my request went nowhere. So, and then through a lot of my litigation issues, which I know make you very unhappy, the board in the legal office took the position that, Mrs. Ortolano, when you make a request, you have to get it to every department yourself. You have to figure out who it goes to. So I was writing right to know requests and sending them to 6, 7, or 8 departments, not knowing if I was even going to the right one, because your policy written on the website didn't apply to me. And I don't like to see that kind of discrimination. I like to see policies be uniform for everybody. And I like to see everyone in the city know this exists. And I think for every alderman here, and I do mean every alderman, when any citizen reaches out to you and asks a question, particularly because you're a chair and you're sitting on a committee in a chairman position or chairwoman position, you have an obligation to respond. You know, it's not a pick and choose game. It's not a discrimination game. And more so, I would like to see you send it to the whole board. Now, I was also told by the city that you updated your board and commission webpage. So now the contact information when a citizen is looking to reach the whole public body is there in a contact name. It's very interesting to me that those contact names are actually not members of the board or committee or commission. However, I used it to get information on the budget review committee. And I tried to speak to you directly. Alderman Dowd sent you an email and it was ignored. So then I went through Donna Graham. What did she do? She spoke to you directly, never sent it to the full budget committee. You gave her an answer and it was typed back to me. So what's the difference between me coming to you because your whole board never got it? And quite frankly, how does the whole budget review committee know that Alderman Dowd answered correctly or that you as members of that public body didn't have information for me? So to me, I want to follow the rule and reach the public body, but your rules don't allow me to. And so you're playing a game here where you say citizens have to reach the public body, but the contact information we're giving you doesn't allow you to. And if we don't respond, we're not breaking the law because you didn't get to the public body. This is a no-win situation for citizens, and it's kind of a malicious game. And that is why I'm a big supporter of written policy.
Do you have a specific question?
I'm-
You're
I'm-
giving a speech. I'd rather you ask questions about the budget.
Sure. Do you think there should be written policy to address this so that we don't get into this situation that costs a lot of money? There's a question.
Let me answer it. We are developing a written policy. I think you're correct about that. But we have answered, 1,500 right-to-know requests from you, and are spending $250,000 at least of taxpayer staff money every year just helping you. And we've responded to, a dozen lawsuits, one of which you're asking for $2 million from the city. Steve Bolton, you filed 10 complaints against him. You've lost them all. We're spending so much time on all these lawsuits and the right-to-know requests, it is more difficult to get to writing a written policy. So if you were to drop all the lawsuits and stop the complaints, most of which goes nowhere, we'd save a lot of money, and we'd probably get to the policy more quickly.
Well, here's my thought on that, Mr. Mayor. Who's writing the policy? It shouldn't be done through the legal office. Why isn't your Board of Aldermen working with a committee of citizens like they do in Hudson or in Milford?
I answered the question.
And they do that.
Can we just go back to the...
So
This has
think,
been hashed and rehashed and hashed and rehashed. The Board of Aldermen over and over, the courts over and over and over. Could we just talk about the budget tonight?
Well, no, I think this
But that's
certainly...
this is a budget public hearing.
I think this is very important.
It's limited to the budget.
Well, And
Not to the right to know written policy.
The budget includes a lot of costs associated with this litigation, which obviously is quite a bee in your bonnet. Then I think it is a cost. And you know what?
It's a very large cost, and we keep winning the cases, and you keep bringing them.
So, well, here's the reality of
Could we get to the budget, please?
Can we not have a debate?
We've heard
Can you
this so
please
many
ask a
times, Ms.
specific
Ortolano.
question?
Well, the mayor so who's writing the policies that are being developed right now?
We'll see. So, we're here to talk about the budget. We've hashed and rehashed over and over and over your right to know issues in the courts, before the aldermen, in public meetings, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, meeting after meeting, year after year, month after month. So could we, tonight, just for one night, could we not talk about your right to know requests, your lawsuits, and all that? Could we just talk about the budget?
No, because you
Well,
spent...
that's the purpose, no?
You spent,
Oh.
no, I said no, because you spent an hour in public meetings
you're not
addressing specifically the
I don't
costs
believe you're in
associated with
charge
that.
of this meeting, Ms. Ortolano.
No, but I get to raise questions associated with costs, which is what I'm doing here, and as much as it irritates you,
And please
I
ask
have a right...
specific
I heard
So
like
I
a
just
20-minute
did.
statement. I didn't even get a
Who is writing
question.
the policy? Do you know who's writing the policy, Alderman
It's
Dow?
not a budget question. It'll probably
budget
be the
question.
legal office.
It'll probably be the legal office? Okay, thank you.
Again, general government, questions only.
It's kind of high, the mic. I'm kind of short. My name is Paula Johnson, 15 Westbourne Drive. Yeah, so when this budget was prepared, was the Board of Aldermen planning on getting a raise at that point in time, that $4,000? That kind of really irks me. Can somebody answer me? So when this budget was written, had they already decided that they were going to vote themselves a $4,000 raise?
I believe the answer is yes.
Yes, okay. And the reason that bothers me is because they voted themselves a raise. Self-serving. Because it doesn't matter whether it's Mrs. Orlano or Ms. Calhoun that's here. I've been coming to these budget meetings since the beginning of 2000, when I was even elected and before I was elected. The purpose here is because the law says that you have to have this. Otherwise, you really don't care what we, the public, are saying, or whether or not we're upset that our taxes keep going up year after year after year with no break. There's no break. So why did the legal department have to hire another attorney? So we have 4 attorneys now.
I think you can ask the police department when they come up.
Why do I have to ask the police department if it's in legal?
It's within the police department. It's the prosecutors. They need more people to prosecute all the pending criminal cases. It's not within the legal department, it's at the PD.
And who's the name of the new attorney in the legal department?
I don't know if that person is, well, the person hasn't been hired
Oh, yes,
because
he has.
Steve's
I
coming.
think, Mayor, she is asking about the Office of Corporation Counsel.
Yeah.
And we have 4 lawyers. We have had 4 lawyers budgeted for since fiscal year 2020. For about half the year last year, one of the positions was vacant while we continued to try and attract a suitable candidate. We managed to hire someone in early February, and that person has now been working for 4 months. But we've had 4 lawyers authorized and budgeted for the last nearly 5 years.
And I'm sorry, when you said additional lawyer, I know that the only additional one in the budget is the police prosecutor, so that's why I was thinking you were referring to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else for general government? Have you been up?
I have. I forgot something. Is that okay? Is there anybody else that wants to speak instead of me? I can hold this question. It's not a difficult one.
Go ahead.
My name is Bill Ferrio. My home is number 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a general question, and it actually starts on page 11. Can you explain the difference between the fiscal year 2024 adopted budget?
Excuse me, but we're on general government now for the
Yes.
offices that I mentioned.
Yes.
If you have a question that was for the general part of the budget, you're going to have to wait till the end.
It's like general government is not the same as general?
We're
So this shows up in general government?
in the mayor's office.
No, it shows up in just the total budget. It shows up in every
No,
department.
right now, we're talking about the mayor's office, the Board
Okay.
of Aldermen,
All right.
the legal department,
Okay.
the city clerk's
All right,
office.
In the mayor's office department, can you explain why there's a difference between the fiscal year 2024 adopted budget and the available budget, and why there's oftentimes a large delta between the two of them?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll take a simple one. When a contract has not been settled prior to the fiscal year, we take those monies and we put them in contingency for negotiations. If we're successful with negotiating the contract during the fiscal year, they're moved from the contingency for negotiations up to the individual departments, so they have enough money in their departments to pay the salaries. That's an example.
So that explains why there would be an increase between adopted and available. Why would there be a decrease? And why would there be a decrease? What would be an example of that? What about the-
Decrease could be where the Board of Aldermen authorized the adopted budget,
Yeah.
and for some reason, they decided to transfer money from that adopted budget to another budget. Anytime that transfer takes place, there needs to be legislative action.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the offices I mentioned before in general government? Seeing none, we'll move on to other general government, the Hunt Building, Parking and Economic Development. It's on page 44 in the hard copy book and page 159 in the electronic.
Lori Ortolano, are there any new positions in this area, particularly in economic development?
The Economic Development Director oversees parking is going to answer that.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. We do have one new position, a parking supervisor.
Okay.
And we also have traded in, essentially, we had 8 part-time positions for the enforcement, so we traded them in for 4 full-time. So the delta there is benefits, because they'll be full-time.
Of course. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And regarding the projects in economic development, Riverwalk project and the others, are those all taken over by the new economic development director? Like, is the Riverwalk project being maintained by you? Okay. Do you have numbers on what the total cost spent on that project is? Okay, and
We know what the authorized expenditure is.
I thought it was around 21 million in
Correct.
in 2020 in December, around that time frame.
Correct.
And then we pulled some money out of the TIF, maybe $1.2 million, $1.3 million, is that right? In TIF money to cover contracts and stuff? I mean, but to do work like contracted work, to do various projects
Yes.
associated with it.
So that was the TIF cash money rather than the bond money. Yep.
Exactly. So that's supplemental. Do we anticipate more costs this year for the project? Or I guess, let me ask this question. How close are we to being done?
Fairly close. We're looking at a spring 2025. So all of the contracts have been awarded. So we're just kind of, playing a jigsaw puzzle Tetris with the different contractors to put them in their appropriate spaces. So we'll kind of work in different areas over the next 9 months.
Okay, and am I correct or close that we pretty much spent the 21 million? We're running close to that now?
We'll probably be pretty close to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, the best I could tell looking at
Yeah.
the math. And do you think you will have any overages on that for next year? Did you budget any overages for that?
We did
No.
not. Nope.
Okay, okay, and as far as projects in economic development, there are a lot of projects in economic development, and I happen to have an email on that, I think. Yes. And I'm wondering, how do we know what projects are being pursued? Because, it doesn't matter, I'll get that. I had gotten some information that we had the West Pearl streetscaping, that's going on. The Millyard concept plan, I think that we know is going on. 249 Main Street, I don't know what that is, if that's the new high-rise. Is 249 Main Street the new low-income high-rise that went up? Okay.
That's the Neighbor Works project
Yeah.
across from CVS.
Okay. 103 Temple Street, what is that?
It's another housing project.
And is that started?
I believe they have started as of now.
And I'm trying to think where that is. That's not Corvo Ruthier and Henry Hanger, is it, or is it?
We don't have money allocated to that.
No, there's no public funding in those
Yeah,
projects.
there's no money. That 103 Temple is the former McElwain site, the McElwain shoe site at the corner of Temple and Spruce.
Okay.
We're not funding that, and if a development goes forward there, we're not participating in that.
Okay, well, it happened to be a project folder that was within economic development, I was told, so that's why I'm looking at it, because it's a folder. What about 75 Lake Street? Are we doing that?
Nope.
Okay, what about 44 Broad Street?
Nope, it's on the market at the moment.
Okay. 21 East Hollis parking lot?
No.
And 9 Riverside, is that for where the police took that building, or is that different?
Yes, that's
Okay.
been moved into admin services, so.
Okay, so that's off the record. And these project folders that are maintained in economic development, are they physical project folders, do you know, or are they electronic? It's
They're
just-
all electronic at the
That's what I
moment.
figured. Okay, thank you very much. And that is economic development. Okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions on the Hunt parking economic development? Seeing none, we'll move on to public safety fire. That's on page 116 in the hard copy, 173 in the electronic copy. You may come up and ask any FY25 budget questions relative to the fire department. Seeing none, we'll move on to public safety police. That's on page 110 in the hard copy, 167 in the electronic copy. Any questions on public safety for the police department?
Christina McKinley, 6 South Great Drive. I just wondered, have they been successful at all in filling the empty positions?
The chief is on his way to the mic.
They're trying. We discuss it constantly.
Well, you had spoken at our ward meeting and
Yes.
said you were doing special things to try and attract, and that, I think I even went to your website, and there are things saying,
Yes, we're
talk to your friends.
We're
I
down,
did talk to my grandson. I just wondered how you're doing.
we're still down 19. But we have 5 coming in July, at least 3 in August. And then there was 2 more certifieds that applied today, so hopefully they come on, so.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're grateful for what you do.
Any other questions for the police department? Seeing none, we'll move on to public health and community services. It's on page 138 in the hard copy, 193 in the electronic. Questions on public health and community services?
Gloria Ortolano, I'm just looking at total positions over there. We had the notable positions, I think were 4. Are there more than 4 coming on in public health and community services?
No. There's the housing services officer, which is currently already in, that person is hired. That person was grant funded, and then there are the 4 community health workers that we discussed at the beginning. Oh, yes, 2 nurses. So there are 2 nurses who were also grant funded that we continued. 2 public health nurses.
And they're going to continue being grant funded?
No.
Oh, they're going on payroll?
Correct.
Okay. What are all these positions doing? Why such an increase in public health?
Well, the nurses are doing the same thing they've always done, administering various health programs for the benefit of usually more disadvantaged people. The housing service officer and the community health workers are directed to the problem of unsheltered homeless people whose numbers are growing, and in an effort to try to find solutions for for individuals who want to be helped so that they can get off the street and lead more productive lives. And public health, community services is finding that they're having some success. I mean, a lot of the cases are hard, but they're having some success finding housing, finding IDs, which is often an obstacle to employment, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else for public health, community services?
Laura Cahoon, 30 Greenwood Drive. The community services budget is up 117%. Hold on. The community health is up 45.47%. Environmental health is up 10.15%. Welfare administration is up 11.39%, and welfare assistance is up 28.81%, with a total of 38% for that department. I don't want to turn into another California. With our taxes going up, we're forcing a lot of older people not able to pay their taxes. So why do we keep increasing this? Where does the 38% fall in your 3.7 increase?
That's the overall city budget.
Of course, but this is 38%. And meantime, if you look at the city, they just, I'm not going to use the word screwed, but they had a big error in their assessing department. And meantime, they've asked for money from older people that shouldn't be paying it. So, give the older people a break. I shouldn't even say that. Give all taxpayers a break. We're tired of paying these increases that are absolutely ridiculous.
Well, you mentioned the increase in welfare. I mean, the state affects our budget in many ways. For example, we have a state obligation to provide local welfare. Now, I believe I'm correct in saying New Hampshire is the only state in the nation that has such an obligation, legal obligation placed on a city like Nashua. So, yeah, we have a state obligation to pay out welfare benefits. The number is 400,000, and it's gone up a bit, but I can tell you they're very careful, trying to meet the guidelines at the same time trying to save money. So,
well, then maybe you need to cut someplace else, because you know what? The taxes are going up so crazy. And I talk to a lot of elderly people, and they're not able to pay their taxes, and I think that is a sin.
Anyone else for public health and community services? All right, we'll move on to administrative services on page 58 in the hard copy and 114 in the electronic version.
Bill Ferrio, 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a question about something on page 60. It lists the FY25 objectives, and the third bullet down says improve morale and communication across all city departments and functions. That's an FY25 objective. Does that mean that there's a morale and a communication problem in the city now? I mean, why would this be in the budget book? You always obviously budgeted for this, some cost associated to doing this task. Is there a
We're just
problem
trying
now
to
that
give
you have
people
addressed?
some insight into what people are working on. It doesn't mean morale is bad. It's just what's wrong with trying to improve things. You know, communication and morale. We're just saying we're trying to improve it.
Is there a cost associated with that? It's a highlight in the budget.
Not really.
I'm sorry.
Not really. Not anything additional. They're
So-
just, it's part of everybody's job.
So it's not really a budget thing. It's not a budget objective.
All right, but people do it during the day. We're just telling you what kind of things these departments are trying to accomplish.
No, what this should be is the stuff they're trying to accomplish with the FY25 budget. These are their goals with that FY25 budget, not the general stuff that they normally do every day and they've done every day for several years. This makes it appear that there's a problem.
So you're saying the bullet that says we're trying to improve morale should not be there?
It has nothing to do with the budget, sir. Unless there's a cost
All
associated
right,
with
well, I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Anything else on administrative services?
Paula Johnson, 15 Westbourne Drive. Maybe if you didn't have the doors locked all the time, you had to ring the bell, morale among the citizens in the city might be a little bit better. You know, we go into City Hall, and we pay for that with our taxes. And if we want to go into any of the departments other than, you know, motor vehicle, where we're paying a lot to register our vehicle, or when we pay our taxes, we don't have to ring the doorbell. But if I want to come see you, and if I wanted to bring you a cup of coffee, Mayor, I have to ring the doorbell to see if you're home. I mean, if you're at work for the day. I mean, that kind of shuts us out as citizens of this city, that we pay for that building in our taxes. Let's face it, we do. We pay for every employee that's in that building. They work for us, the citizens of the city, like the Board of Aldermen does, the Board of Education, and any other board that's elected. They work for we the people. But the problem is, even tonight, the attitude that's towards some of us, whether you like us or not, whether we voted for you or not, is appalling. And I've sat on both sides, being elected and non-elected, and I've taken the lumps with the bumps here. But I'm telling you, I think it's really appalling, these attitudes. From you, Alderman Dowd, you got the gavel. This year's not 3 minutes. We can talk about things, come up once. You know, we don't have that time. You know, we ask questions in the budget because we want to know how our money is being spent here. And with Ms. Calhoun, what she said, it's getting harder and harder for my husband and I. We thought we'd be in Florida, but I guess it was a godsend. They're flooding out in Florida, and homeowners insurance is so high. But we live in the city. I've lived in my house for 40 years. I've paid taxes on that house. And I saw how much my taxes have gone up in 40 years. And it is hard. Anybody have a problem here of what I'm saying? I hope not. And it's getting harder and harder for all us seniors. Because some of us don't get that tax exemption that we can't because our Social Security is added into income, which it shouldn't be. And so you know what? I stand here and I listen to people year after year. It doesn't matter which side I'm on. Your attitude is appalling, and you need to change it.
Anyone else for administrative services?
Lori Ortolano, and just a point for clarification. When we get, did you tell somebody that at the end they can come up and ask a general question, but they have to wait till we get through all of this? Is that correct? I'm
Yes.
just trying to understand
Yes.
what the format is. Thank you. With assessing, we've had a change in our department. No big deal. We're working through that. Where do we stand now for personnel? I know we were trying to bring in some people. I think there might be some people who have been brought in. Where do we stand in assessing now with personnel?
I think Mr. Cummings is the best person to answer that. The question is about personnel and assessing.
Great, yes, thank you. Good evening. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Relative to assessing, we are pretty much full-staffed. The budget, as proposed, treats the staffing level equally. There's one additional assessor added, but there's a deletion of a department coordinator position, so it nets out to 0. We are looking to also add some contracted services for some chief assessing help through a contract. That hasn't been executed yet, but we are carrying money in FY25's budget to be able to do that. Thank you.
Okay, stick around for a minute, please. We do have $99,000 allocated for vision to serve the purpose of being a chief. That was voted on more recently, and it was done hopefully not as a continuing position, because the goal was, before the people left, that we had one assessor down there that was closer to becoming certified as a chief, or working on their supervisory status. Did that person leave? We had 2. I knew of 2 women down there out of the 4 that were certified assessors. One of them left. I thought the one who left was a little farther along. Who's down there now who's close to becoming certified as a supervisor?
Again, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. So to answer the specific question, there is no one down there, quote unquote, right now being close to being a chief certified assessor or an assessing supervisor through the credentialing of DRA. But what the plan will be is to use a contracted service. Although a vision was originally contemplated to do it, they provided it over the last year. The idea is to move in a different direction with a different group for next year, retaining vision still to continue doing inspections and doing some of the inspectional services that they have been providing, but not necessarily the assessing supervising position. The assessing supervising position, to achieve that credential, according to DRA, can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years, typically 5 years on average. Yes. And so I would anticipate us needing this contracted service for multiple years. Thank you.
Okay, because it was said when we took on vision last year for $99,000 that we weren't going to hold them long, because we were going to bring somebody into a supervisory position, but my understanding was that could take quite a while. Now, who's covering abatements this year, abatement applications? Is that still under a contract with Vision?
That's under Vision's contract.
Okay, and also, where do we stand on the scanned property record files? In 2022, we had an update before Ms. Kleiner left that there were 900,000 documents to review for potential redactions before they could be uploaded in the system and be part of the scanned property record file gig. I went down to assessing, I talked to staff. They were not aware of that. The goal of that project was to have a computer down in assessing that was dedicated with that DocuWare software, so you could access any of those property record files you wanted by just going on that computer. And then there was going to be a link so that the home files would be done. How did we put a hold on the 900,000 documents that had to be reviewed and redacted to become part of this online system? Where does that project stand?
I think the answer is that we ran out of all the money that was allocated, which was, I think, $90,000 to... Now, what we're talking about is all the property record cards are online. So what you're asking about is you've suggested 900,000, that's probably correct. Pages of history of each property would potentially be scanned and put online. We appropriated money for that. It was quite a bit. The costs kept going up and up and up. And in the end, there was only one person asking for this information, so I think we didn't allocate any additional money to it.
So
Now-
the project was never completed? So I was
It's not
under-
completed.
If
But
I may, if I
unless-
may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the body here. So for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services, a recommendation was made to me by the assessing staff and the IT department to put the project on hold, as the mayor indicated, because there was cost escalation coming for the project, and we felt it was prudent of us to take a step back and get an understanding of the current situation before we allocated any more additional dollars to this project.
Okay, and when was that done? When was it determined to hold this project?
Earlier this year, so in FY '24, and to be clear, there is no money set aside in FY '25's budget for this initiative.
And was that decision conveyed to the Board of Aldermen?
Was it what?
Conveyed to the Board of Aldermen that this project was on hold?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And just to be clear, you indicated one person wanted this.
I mean, it's implicitly communicated in the sense that there's not additional money for the project and the project's not done, so.
Well, my understanding, going to those meetings and certainly trying to follow it, was the 90,000 was to take us through all the scanning. And then, so everything would be scanned and Inception would deliver everything back, and that was going to handle it all. And then Ms. Kleiner said there was another $7,500 that went to creating the interface that was going to bring all of these documents onto the computer. But of course, when she said there are 900,000 pages of documents to be reviewed and redacted, I viewed that as a huge, huge job. I mean, millions could be. If you're concerned about redactions on documents that Lori Ortolano is requesting, and that's your big area of concern, the review that requires redactions is a true time burden on staff. Our requests for records, citizen requests for records, don't even come close to nearly 1 million pages. So if $1 million has been spent in the last 4 years, or $250,000 a year, to get 100,000 pages of redacted documents, let's say 100,000 is pretty generous, what would the cost be for 900,000 pages to be reviewed and redacted? I viewed that as astronomical. And just to be clear, I did not ask for that to happen. It was done, and we were all of the belief that it was a reasonable task, but I don't think the project was spoken through to the public in its entirety, or to the board, to understand the true costs of all of that labor that would have to come through staff. I mean, last time Ms. Kleiner spoke about it, she said, we're going to have to employ many departments to contribute to reviewing and redacting.
Well, we
so-
disagree about the history, but anyway, the project is
On hold.
on hold.
Okay, and then there was a question raised, and I asked it, and I don't know that it's been answered. Gary Perrin, who is handling all the right-to-know requests, and as the administrator, a suggestion was made to put all of those online so that the public can see those requests, and we would have like a database of information on what's been requested and what documents have been compiled. I think it's a good idea. Other cities are doing it. Other municipalities are doing it because it's easy. You know, you're keeping a database, so you click and you load it up. I never got an answer on this. Is there any effort being made to put that online? Then people like me don't have to file right-to-knows to see what was submitted or to track. And if I lose sight of one of my right-to-knows, I know I got a database I can just go back to and click on and just see it. Is there any effort being done? Mr. Cummings said he would look into that. Is there any effort being done to do that?
Well, it's always a possibility, but given the volume, you yourself have submitted 1,500. So given the volume and the volume of documents, I mean, just doing that would require weeks, months of work.
I don't want you to do it based on what's done in the past. I'm not asking you to do that. I think whatever start date you have, if you start tomorrow, you start with the right-to-knows coming into tomorrow. I'm not asking you to go back and create a historical database. That would require more time. I'm just asking, going forward, from this day forward, do the deal. And I think you're going to see that the right-to-knows have come down a great deal. And I think that that is a beneficial service.
You're saying they would come down?
No,
I mean,
they
what,
have already.
99% of the right-to-know requests come from a single person. So if that person were to reduce that number, yeah, they would go down. But if that person continued, they wouldn't go down. So
Well,
it's in your control.
Well, are you aware that the one person who's filed more right to knows is not me? Are you aware of that?
Who's filed more than you, just out of curiosity? Well, I don't, that's not accurate. Look, the
So-
right to know issues are so much, we've counted these over, and just to count the numbers is
Well, wait a minute.
enormous staff
Let's
time.
not hash it. Let's just say,
All right.
all I'm saying is, given where we are now, I put in some right to knows.
Maybe.
Why not create the database now? I'm not asking you to
I
go through
don't-
history. And, you know,
maybe.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're very technologically dated when you say, gosh, taking it from the computer that it's in there and clicking it and moving it to a file that's a public access file is really so burdensome and difficult. That is like 10 seconds to move it. Once you've compiled it and you got the file, you send it out to me as an email. It's a click of a button. Who cares if you put it on a public web page? It's a click of a button.
Maybe you're right.
I mean, that's the simple stuff I'm
Okay.
talking about. The other thing is,
If I may,
I
I'd
think
like
Director
to
Cummings
address
wants
that.
to-
Thank you. And again, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. And so it is something that's being evaluated. No decision has been made to date. Our current information systems aren't able to talk as easily as being described by the speaker, and the systems need to work together to be able to do what is being suggested. But one of the things we are looking at is maybe some software, and it could be a feature if we implement certain software where we could look to do it administratively less burdensome than it currently would be right now. With our current resources, it's not something that I could recommend to the mayor or to the Board of Aldermen, but as we continue to progress with our evaluations and in the software systems that we're looking at, that might be something that we could do. Thank you.
okay, I find that a
I
very,
mean, I generally
very,
think it's a be idea.
and I find that a really poor
Because,
answer, especially from
it would
6
be-
months ago
I mean,
asking.
people would be amazed, I think.
Well, I think so too, and they benefit, they could see it. And
Yeah.
I'm not embarrassed to have my right to knows go on a public website, I'm not embarrassed.
Well, that's
And
good.
just put them up there. And I have learned, when I saw Gary Perrin's request 50 or so that came from other people, and I see the kinds of questions they're asking, they're informative. I learned stuff from those right to know requests that 50 other people put in.
All right, well, we're evaluating it, and as you've heard, it would require a software
Okay.
addition.
Okay, and the other thing is that was going to be done to assist with the cost of all of this was looking at and evaluating redacting software. Redacting is the big thing. A year ago, I came here and I said, has the city pursued any type of software to deal with redactions? And Tim Cummings took the microphone and said, we'd be happy to look into that. What has been done on that?
Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Since that time, we've demoed 2 types of softwares. We're looking to demo a third to be able to do the redactions being spoken about right now. But all this software that we're talking about would do everything, whether it's to maintain a database online, to do the redactions and whatnot. And so we're doing comprehensive evaluation of the various right-to-know software that's available and to see what might make the most sense for the city. Thank you.
Could you bring that and do a demo for the Board of Aldermen on that? It's been 12 months, and I think that would be really helpful to the public to see what you're looking at tools, given the cost. I mean, it's, you know, we complain about the cost. It's $250,000, according to the city, to do these redactions and reviews, and it's gone on for 4 years, and, you know, it seems to take us so long to look at this software to bring it online, and we're still evaluating. It's been 12 months. So I'd like to suggest that the Board of Aldermen invite Director Cummings in with IT and do a review of this software and show you the various vendors and the price point of it, so we all know when this is coming. I think that would be extremely helpful.
Any additional questions?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Anyone else for Administrative Services that hasn't spoken already? You can't come up a second time.
I haven't spoken on administrative services.
I had you as the first one for Administrative Services.
No, I did the public health. Because if I run down my administrative services is up 30%. Arlington Street is up 46.84%. Benefits is up 29, so even if you take the 16% off, you're up 13.41. Please don't laugh and pay attention, Mayor, because I'm up
not
here to ask
laughing.
you.
I'm asking where these numbers come from.
Well, look at your budget book. Risk management is up 27%. City buildings up 121%. If you look, your budget for 2024 was $733,000. It's now up to $1,622,000. That is a difference of $888,000, which is a 121% increase.
And which budget are you talking about?
Your 2025, it's gone from 2024 up to 2025. You also have assessing up 19%. You have GIS is up 57%, and Peril is up 17%, so it gives you a whole...
One of the items that is new for the 2025 budget is, within the figures that you're talking about, is the abandoned or empty Elm Street school building. Now, to keep that open, I mean, it's a pretty complicated subject, but in general, to keep that open, or to keep it standing, requires heating, security, and other measures that will enable the building to remain standing. It has to be heated because it has to be, there has to be fire suppression. Once it's empty, we intend to put in boarded windows on the first floor according to fire department specifications, which I think that's $100,000. I don't think in that number, but there will be certain security costs because we expect people will go into the building, and they'll need to be, for two purposes, maybe as shelter. Other people go in to strip out copper. So we've seen that in the past. So there will need to be certain police activity. I don't think that's really in the budget, but certainly that will be a financial commitment.
Well, you could also use it for the homeless. That might save us money.
Anyone else for administrative services? You have been up. No, you can come up at the end if you have another question.
Laurie was talking about assessing budget. Is it now the time to talk about assessing budget? You allowed her to talk about assessing. Is now the time for that, or is there going to be a specific?
Assessing is part of administrative services, but you were already up once. If you have another question,
But you
come up
said
at the end.
administrative services, you talked about a specific page.
That covers the entire administrative services, so you can come up at the end with your question. Next is public library. Page 167 in the hard copy book, 226 in the electronic copy. Any questions on the public library?
Lori Ortolano, just a quick question. I know the mayor met with the library staff. They have their renovation project that they'd really like to get going on, and I think it's estimated about $30 million, and it's a little bit stuck given the debt plans for the next 5 years to do. And I think, Mr. Mayor, you suggested to them that they pursue a new markets tax credit, potentially go out and look at that, and raise that in the meeting. Was that raised to them, the new market tax credit, at their meeting?
I don't know. I mean, it's possible I mentioned it as a possibility, but there are no definite plans to do that.
Okay, because,
there's no specific plan for the library to begin with, so only if you had a specific plan could you ever apply for a new market tax credit.
Well, that's true. That was a big task, and I'm hoping that we would do things a little differently in how we pursue one of those, should we take one on again, that's all. And it seemed like it was something raised in their meeting to pursue, but I view that as a very long-term, difficult thing to do.
Just to be clear, I did not say we should pursue a new market tax credit. I said, well, there's various ways you could try to bring in money, and that was I don't really recall, but I easily could have mentioned that as a possibility, but not as something that is a definite. We don't even have a defined project yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else for Public Library? Seeing no one, we'll move to Community Development Division, which is on page 172 in the hard copy book and page 230 in the electronic printout. Any questions for the Community Development Division?
Yes, just quickly, Lori Ortolano. We're going through this project right now to recode the city. I think that's what it's called, Code Up or whatever it's called. I did attend a few of those meetings, but I couldn't go to all of them for that week. But they were very informative. The gentleman who spoke was very knowledgeable, very professional. Is that initiative to code, to change all the coding, tied to a necessity in order to get the grant money to do the train study and the train, bringing in a train station into Nashua? Is it necessary for us to get our codes updated to do that?
It's unrelated. The rewriting of the code has to do with the master plan. It is to put into code the concepts that were adopted in the master plan.
Okay, and I want to just ask a couple questions. I know a new court order came out on the BJ's Costco City of Nashua issue regarding building that Costco facility off of Spitbrook Road, and it looks like it's been reversed by the judge with the concerns, and it was a long court order, with the concerns focused on the fact that the traffic impact study was not adequate. And it just concerned me what was written in there, that the city decided on remand to allow old data to be used that lacked with the current standards or the 2-year standards that were necessary to put a facility that would bring that type of traffic in that area. And it noted that the community development assistant, Mr. Dufresne, I don't know if Sam is who I know him as, had determined that the traffic study didn't need to be done. And my concern about that is, why did somebody so junior make that decision? I mean, and why did we?
Well, I haven't read the decision. I mean, the dispute was really between Costco and BJ's, and that's really what the litigation was all about. But I think the judge's decision was based on traffic, as you suggested. Sam Durfee is not junior, he's the planning director. But if you want, I mean, this is not really a budget issue, but so briefly, Matt can talk about this case. Matt Sullivan, the community development director. I don't know that it was Sam Durfee that decided on what traffic study.
He was the one mentioned.
This is an issue that was before the planning board.
Happy to address it, Mr. Mayor. Sam Durfee was mentioned in the order as being the decision maker on that item, but in fact, that decision was made collaboratively between Mr. Durfee, Engineer Hudson, and senior leadership of both divisions as to whether new traffic numbers were actually needed for consideration in front of the planning board. And then ultimately, the planning board chose to proceed with consideration of the applications absent that new traffic data. But just to be clear, the engineering department of the Division of Public Works are consulted consistently throughout the process. They were in this case as well. And ultimately, it was found or determined internally that new data were not necessary. Clearly, the court disagreed, or partially disagreed with that. But just to be clear, that decision was made collaboratively.
Okay, and so the court's decision to reverse it, does that mean it can be brought back again, or is it done right now? At this point, it would have to go under appeal or something?
It can be brought back again. It's not clear whether changes will be proposed, but it could be brought back again, yes, in a similar format as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Community Development Division?
Laura Glenn, 30 Greenwood Drive. I know the mayor mentioned something about $400,000 to transportation, but with the whole line of transportation, the transportation account went up 81%. Do you really feel that this was necessary doing it this year with the inflation the way it is? Because the whole Department of Community Development went up 14%, well above your 3.7.
The whole budget was up 3.7, but The number I mentioned was the increase in the transportation, in the bus system. It's not the whole number. At 400,000 is the increase. The choice is between basically ending the bus system or coming up with the money. I mean, that's really because as I mentioned, and Matt Sullivan can give you more detail, but the overhead and the operating expenses are significant enough that cutting back a route or two really doesn't reduce the overall expenses very much. So you either, and this is the result of federal cutbacks basically, and that the way this money, federal transportation money is allocated is quite complicated, and it has to do with the fact that we're grouped in with Massachusetts being on the border instead of with Manchester. You know, it's all these federal regulations. Anyway, we either come up with that money or basically end the bus system. And a lot of people here rely on it to go to work and all that, especially people who are working the low-end jobs who don't make a lot of money. Maybe they can't even afford cars, or they don't have cars. So, you know, it's been a service that's been available in Nashua for 40 years, and ending that bus transportation would, in my judgment, be a mistake.
I'm not saying end it, but do you need 400,000 in one year?
I'm telling you that, I mean, we could delay it, but then next year it would be more.
Well, why not put some in this year and some in next year? At least bring it down.
Do you want to give more detail? The money, as we're looking at it, like a cut out a route, you save like 20 grand. So we cut out 4 or 5 routes, we're still spending, you know, 700 instead of 800,000. So the basic decision is, do you want to run the system the way it is or not at all?
To address Ms. Colquhoun's question, there's actually been consideration of a substantial increase in this budget for several years. What you may not know is that the total transit system budget is substantially larger. The city of Nashua, for approximately 2+ decades, has had relatively low increases in the budget to pay to the transportation system. In the 22-year period that I have on record right now, the budget has gone up less than 2% year over year to the transit system. In that time, we've had several additional allocations, whether through federal or state monies, that have filled the gap in the system and the cost of running the system. One of the largest ones being the recent ARPA allocation, or a separate ARPA allocation, transportation specific, that went to the bus system that kept us operating at a full capacity for several years through COVID. That said, we knew there would be a point in time where a budget increase was necessary. We had internal discussions about when the appropriate time for that was and whether it was better to have incremental budget increases over time, or was it better, in fact, to have one large budget increase at one given time. Ultimately, what we decided is to do the latter. That's why you see the $400,000 increase that's in the budget here before you. However, we tried every possible method to find additional funding sources to try and diminish that increase within the budget, but we unfortunately are at a point where it's not possible to do so.
But at 81%, couldn't you have done 25 this year and 25 next year, and then the balance in the third year?
If I may address that, the answer is no, and the reason for that is that $800,000, which is the $400,000 increase, represents the cost of running the service. And so had we not allocated the full $800,000, or the 81% increase that you're referring to, we would be at a system at the end of the fiscal year, we'd be at a point where at the end of the fiscal year where we could not operate the service any longer. And so that $800,000 number, the 81% you referred to, those numbers were carefully calculated in cooperation with the finance division. That's the number we need to operate the service. Any smaller number would result in a shortfall.
Thank you.
And how much federal money is appropriated to that, to the bus system in the, or planned for fiscal 25?
So just as a general overview, the total budget for the system is approximately $4.1 to $4.2 million. The total allocation from the city will be $800. The allocation from the federal government is estimated to be about $2.3 to $2.4 million. The remainder of the expenses are paid by a mix of fare box, which is the fees we actually collect, and then other revenue and other contracts and grants from the state of New Hampshire that we receive.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Community Development Division? Seeing none, we'll move on to Public Works and Engineering. In the hard copy book, it's page 196. In the electronics, it's 255.
Bill Ferrio, 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a question about page 205. There's an FY25 objective about halfway down. The bullet says pave the parking lot at the Y. So wasn't that done last year or the year before?
No.
You sure about that, Mayor?
Yeah.
I just
No,
drove through the...
Unless we're talking about a different parking lot, but there's a city-owned parking lot that is adjacent to the Y, and that has not been paved.
The lot that the city stores equipment on was paved last year or the year before.
Well, let's see.
Director Poto?
Thank you. Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works. You're correct in that half of the parking lot was paved. The part that it was closest where the street department stores their equipment, the other half was not paved. That other half will be paved this season.
The half that the YMCA patrons use?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from Public Works?
Christine McKinley, 6 Southgate Drive. Actually, the very next bullet point makes note of the disc golf course that has been proposed actually almost 2.5 years ago at Roby Park, and I have been attending the meetings for that proposal for 2.5 years. I'm hopeful that it will actually not end up on that budget. It doesn't say anything about how much. I know that from what I've understood, and I believe this came from the CFO's office, that $30,000, some of which was Rotary, the Rotary Club's donations, some of which I guess is budgeted from taxpayers. But I don't know. I assume, Mayor Donchis, you're aware that we support as taxpayers already multiple playgrounds, tennis courts, soccer fields, baseball, basketball, swimming pools. Even I saw a climbing net, volleyball. We have many, many sport fields. Roby Park happens to have a forested area that has a walking trail. I can tell you from personal experience, because I happen to be the wife of the largest private abutter to Roby Park, and particularly during COVID years, where people were prohibited from going anywhere, from gathering anywhere. Many, many people that wandered into Roby Park ultimately wandered on to our property and our trails. They were grateful to be somewhere that they could walk unmasked. They were grateful to discover trails that were actually well maintained. What I hope will happen, instead of turning this into another team sport area, because my understanding is the focus is to turn this into an 18-hole competition course. My preference, and many people that I know who have been working with the protest against this for the past 2.5 years, is that this remains a protected forest, that the wetland is protected, that the habitat for the animals are protected, that just the whole environment is protected, and there aren't that many places where people can go for quiet contemplation. I'm not sure how many people in Nashua actually realize that that park is about to disappear. What I also know is not too many people, I've listened to people from Department of Public Works and other departments that are advocating this, standing up for the past 2.5 years telling me I don't really know that much about disc golf. I just know a lot of people love it. I knew nothing about disc golf, but I felt like it was my obligation to learn something. I can't imagine having a job that for 2.5 years I'm tasked with talking about an issue and not learning anything, still standing up in front of everyone and saying, I know nothing about it, just people love it. Well, I can tell you something about it. Having studied both the Disc Golf Association, watching videos of what happens at the tournaments, reading about what competition level people need, the requirements for that, they will throw a competition person 450 feet potentially at 80 miles an hour this disc.
Excuse me,
proposal-
I hate to interrupt you, I know your passion for this, but do you have a specific question relative to the FY25 budget?
It's on the budget. It's on the budget, and my question is why? We have so many sport
Well, the money that would,
locations.
if this goes ahead, and it's before the ZBA, as I'm sure you're aware, and they will decide whether it goes ahead.
And
But,
that's next week.
and there are many people on the other side who are advocating in favor of this, so.
And
So there's a
those that are
disagreement,
advocating in
which
favor
will be
include
resolved by the
people,
ZBA.
Mayor Donches, who
But it
stand
would-
up and tell me they know nothing about disc
But
golf.
you ask me a question, or you want an answer, and I try to answer, and you don't want me to say anything, or you keep interrupting. So the cost of it would be paid by the Rotary. Now, I don't know if that's a $30,000 number. I
So
don't know if it'll go ahead or not. That's up to the ZBA. There are people on both sides of the issue.
So even if the Rotary Club money got us through the actual build-out, I looked at the examples of other things that have gone in, including other Rotary-sponsored things. But I see, for example, the David Dean Skateboard Park requires $175,000 plus set aside, and I don't know where that money comes from. Is that taxpayer money?
No.
So people have to keep coming up with money for these special projects, the labyrinth.
The David Dean's Park is paid for from the revenue derived from one of the cell phone towers.
Okay, great. All I'm hoping is that, I truly hope that, one, this doesn't become something taxpayers have to pay for. Two, that we don't destroy a natural habitat. Three, that we don't end up with just another place that is sort of dominated by people who want to be on a team of some sort. Plenty of people like to go by themselves for a walk, and taking away that opportunity seems wrong to me. But in addition to that, the trash on East Dunstable Road is already untenable. The parking over these last weekends with the new, with baseball teams getting active and so forth, they were parked all up and down Spitbrook Road. They were on the grass of Roby Park, and yet the proposal keeps telling us there's adequate parking for yet another addition to that park. That's not true, and anybody who is honest knows that's not true. And in addition, the safety issues that have to do with just the whole process of playing the game.
Again, I understand your passion, but this is something you need to bring before the zoning. It's not
And I will
part
be
of the
there
budget.
next Tuesday, the 25th, I think it's Tuesday. But this has been going on for almost at least 2.5 years, and started, and maybe this, my final comment is, I know nothing about all the access for the right to know things. I've never asked for one, don't know anything really much about it. But I can see that the way this project started, there were no permits, there was no notice to a butter, everything about it was under the radar. So it's no wonder we have people asking for right to know, because there's something that the impression is that that things are done in our city that are purposefully hidden. So that must be why there are so many right-to-know requests, because this project was hidden.
There have been many
Equipment, Mayor Donchis. The only reason that it began to be known was because we heard the trees coming down. They had big, whatever you call those, digger things in the wetland in the midst of the skunk cabbage. We took photographs of it. So this was done in a completely underhanded way, completely without normal permits and without authorization from the Conservation Committee.
Excuse me, again, you're not asking questions. If you're not asking questions,
It is a question. Why do we run the city that way? Why?
Well, I don't agree with your factual history of this.
There's nothing I said that isn't true. Anybody here can take a look at 2.5 years worth of meetings from the Conservation Committee,
on the one hand, you
board
tell me,
meetings, and so forth.
On the one hand, you tell me it's all undercover, everything's hidden. But on the other hand, you talk about 2.5 years of public meetings.
Meetings where people brought it forward that it was being
Well, it's been under consideration. There have been many public meetings. It's not even decided yet. Now it's going to the
And I
ZB.
hope people will show up and protest
I mean,
it.
it's been, a dozen, 20 public meetings about this. I don't even, I'm guessing, I don't really know, but a lot. So to say that it's being done secretly, I don't think is correct.
is there any else for Public Works and Engineering? Seeing no one, we will go to Financial Services Division, including the areas of SURF, hydrants, street lighting, debt service, and contingency. It's on page 104 in the hard copy book, 161 in the electronic.
Fred T-Boom, 24 Cheyenne. I was sitting at home. I wasn't planning to be here. I haven't really studied this book very much this year. Too busy getting ready for a lawsuit against the city. But I have a couple of quick questions in financial services. Number one, where is the spending cap calculation? Either in the budget or attached to the resolution for the budget?
The spending cap calculation, which one of the residents thought would be an enhancement, as the mayor and I agree, should be in the budget, but more importantly, it was attached to the resolution.
Well, I have a copy of the resolution right here, and I don't see it. In fact, I went back to fund the building and picked up a copy of a whole bunch of resolutions there, a whole bunch of copies of the resolution. It ain't attached. Where is the spending cap calculation?
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So a little bit of background. When I arrived in 2010, the spending cap had been in place since 1994, and for the life of me, I can't find any calculation of the spending cap. But we can always improve.
No, it's in the ordinance, Mr. Gibbons. The ordinance says...
I've looked at the resolutions, and it was never attached.
Well,
and as you mentioned in one of your interrogatories to Mr. Healy, City Clerk Healy, you said, I think it was first introduced in the budget in either 2010 or 2011. And I'm happy to report, I had nothing to do with the 2010 budget, but I included the calculation in 2011.
Mr. Gibbons, if you look at the ordinances that deal with budget control, and it's Section 5 of the Administrative Code. I'm not here prepared to give the exact quotation. You'll see that there is a mentioning of calculating the cap and providing the figures under above or below. So you have in the resolution, it does say you're supposedly $4 million below the cap. But in the ordinances, where is the calculation, at least the $4 million conclusion?
So, may I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Griffin?
So most of you know me, but I've been calculating the spending cap since 2011.
Huh?
A couple of years, we were fortunate we didn't have to calculate the spending cap.
Yeah.
But most recently, I calculated to the best of my ability, and everybody probably knows I'm being sued for my calculation of the spending cap, which I totally disagree with, and I can't speak further on it because I might be called, if there is a case, if there is a court, I might be called as a witness to protect myself. Thank you.
Well, I know you're going to be called. That's not the question. The question is, and remains, has been answered. Where is the calculation in the resolution? This has always been published since 2011. Or where's the calculation of spending cap in the budget book? Which has always been there since 2011. It's a very simple question. Where is it?
Yeah, and I just answered it.
Well, you said you can't be answering.
It's not in the budget book, and I think the mayor and I would agree that going forward, it will probably be the first page.
Okay.
Now, prior budget books, early 2000s, not sure if you were a Board of Alderman member, I had to search high and low to even find it.
No, it didn't exist.
Thank you.
It didn't exist.
You're
before-
right, it would be better if it were there, but I don't think it would be page 1, but it would be better if
Well,
it were
page
there.
20, page 20 would be nice.
Yeah, it'd be better if it were there.
But it wasn't there before 2011. The spending cap goes back to 1994 because no one ever thought about publishing an ordinance until I came up with it about putting it in the budget book. That's why. So nobody could figure out what the cap was, including myself while I was an alderman. Let me go on. The reason I'm here, I was sitting watching television, channel, 90 government channel, and somebody came up and said, and questioned you about the quotation about 3.7%, and I found it, because you said it was it's nowhere in the book, as Laura pointed out. But I did find it in the book, and it's under a statement from you, Mr. Mayor. And it's right on the first page, the introductory page. Now I'm trying to find it. Well, you know where it is. It says 3.7% is
Correct.
the increase in budget.
Correct.
I find no backup anywhere in this budget book about that. And you said it's in the resolution. Well, I pull up the resolution, and there's nothing in the resolution that mentions 3.7%. Nothing in the budget book other than your own comment, and nothing in the resolution. So if you can tell me where in the budget, I'll repeat what Laura asked for, but never got an answer for it. Where is it in the budget book? The 3.7%.
As we've discussed during the course of this meeting, it was not included in the budget book. It was attachment to the resolution. And as you know me, Mr. T-Boom, you ask me a question, I answer it.
Oh, yes. So where is it? Which resolution are we talking about?
The budget resolution
I have it here in front of me.
talks to the 4 million under the spending cap.
No, I'm talking about we passed that point. We passed the publication of the spending cap calculation. I'm at 3.7% statement from the mayor in his introductory page. Where is that 3.7%?
In the budget book?
Yes.
It's not in there.
Okay. Where is it in the resolution?
It's not in the resolution, it's the backup that gives rise to the 4 million under the cap in the resolution.
The 3.7% is in the calculation of the spending cap?
It's the ingredients that are included in that spending cap calculation.
Okay, let me put something on. On page 11 is a very nice summary of the budget. Outstanding, one page, the entire thing laid out in one page. It's fabulous. Never happened before. Congratulations. However,
So we did something right.
you did something
Well,
right.
there's one page at least. Yes.
Oh,
Good.
there's lots
Thank
of
you.
pages. I have not made many comments here tonight. But I'm looking at the appropriations by fund type. That's a total. in fiscal '25, the total budget is $456,147,841. In fiscal '24, last year, well, this year, but last year I did this budget. On page 11, any of you aldermen here can take a look at it, maybe the first time you ever look at the budget. $412,263. I took my little trusty calculator, called a PC, and divided one number by the other. Guess what? The increase in the budget this year is 10.7%.
But we did cover this before you came in.
How do you possibly?
We covered this before you came in. The
Yes.
way the 3.7 is derived is that there were $10.6 million of supplemental appropriations passed during fiscal '24, which becomes part of the budget. So when you compare the total appropriations in fiscal '24, including the supplementals, with the '25 number, it's 3.7%. Now, we did cover this. You
Wait a
came in a
minute.
little late, I noticed.
Are you telling me?
We did cover this before you came in.
Are you telling me that this budget book is missing $24 million?
I'm telling you, missing 24, I mentioned $10.6 million of supplemental appropriation.
It's actually $24 million.
Pardon?
The supplemental appropriation is about $24 million.
I don't know where you're getting that number.
From your own calculations of this spending cap that you never published. But that's not the point. You're telling these aldermen, if you understand it at all, maybe Dow does, I think you do, there's $24 million missing. Because I'm calculating 10.7% right here. I don't see anything about supplemental appropriation in here. In fact, there never will be. This is what is called sleight of hands. You go to New York City, they play the little game with the three little balls in the cup. You're playing a game of 3 cups and a ball. Where's the ball? This is not, even though it's a very nice budget, a lot of nice pictures, very complete, it is not accurate. It's missing around $24 million.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, Mr.
You
Griffin?
might want to look at the second column called available budget. That includes the supplemental appropriations.
Which column?
Fiscal '24 available budget.
It says $412 million.
Next column over.
Available budget? I have no idea what that means. It's never been explained. What's that mean?
We
available
explained
budget?
it before you came in.
You mean you invented money and printed it?
It was explained before you came in.
It was?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand. I can have $412 million adopted budget, but the available budget is $487 million. In fact, that's $30 million more than the 456. Are we going to have a tax refund?
It's a combination, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Griffin?
of capital escrows move forward into the budget, supplemental appropriations to the different line items.
I'm sorry.
That exhibit was,
Mr. Griffin?
the exhibit, I stand behind that. I've done the same exhibit for 3 straight years. We were sued last year, sued this year. We'll go to the court if they want us. We can talk about it then.
Mr. Griffin, I know you're leaving the city, and I sat this year ago because I think you're a pretty good guy. You're knowledgeable. But trying to explain this budget in terms of 3.7%, when you really got 10.7% in the budget, and then trying to explain those other figures that we explained are not in the budget, makes no sense. That's all I can say right now.
Any other comments on SERP, hydrants, street lighting, debt service, or contingency?
Bill Ferrio, 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a question on page 242, debt service. The yellow line at the bottom of the table, can you explain what that means? Does that say that you've paid 18.5 million of the 19 million planned to pay for fiscal year 2024? Does that say you've already paid 18 million of the 19 million? 18.5 of the
Page 242, the
242, the yellow line.
the bolded line, total
Yeah.
expenditures.
Yeah. This says year-to-date, fiscal year 2024, 18.5 million, and you had budgeted 19 million.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if
Yes,
I
Mr.
may. That
Griffin?
was through March 31st, if
Right.
you look at the column.
Right.
So we would either have an additional payment or the difference between the adopted budget and that amount would be surplus.
So my question, so does that say you've actually paid 18.5 million of the 19 million?
Correct.
That's the first, okay. So my second question, what happens when you've paid 19 million? Do you continue paying on the debt? Do you pay additional, pay the debt down additionally in 2024?
Well, part of the, you pay, you pay, there are two aspects of the payments. One is interest.
Yeah.
Number two is principal. So the portion that is a principal payment, yes, it reduces the obligation.
But if you've paid 18.5 million, now it comes time to make another payment. Do you pay beyond the 19 million because you have that money available, or would you stop paying the debt? Just stop paying the debt once you reach 19 million?
You can't prepay in most cases. You can't, these bonds are not prepayable.
Okay, so you can't pay beyond the 19 million?
No, generally speaking, no.
Okay.
Because the bond buyers want assurances, they want certainty, and they don't want a situation where they buy something and then 2 years later someone pays it off. I mean, they're buying a long-term debt obligation.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else for this area only? Seeing none, last but not least is education. And the page in the hard copy book is 231, and the electronic page is 293. No one? Then Alderman Bryan isn't here. Would somebody like to make a motion to retable? Alderman Moran? The motion on the floor is to table R-24-057.
I thought you said we could ask a question at the end about the whole thing. You said we could come back up. Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
If you have a specific question on an area that was missed,
Bill Ferrio, 35 Indian Rock Road. I had a question on page, blah, 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 blah. 82, risk management. I don't remember that being called up. On page 82, about halfway down, there's a line item for legal services, $500,000. Can you explain why are there legal services in the budget for this department?
Because there are a lot of lawsuits pending, and most of them are being handled by outside counsel.
So why wouldn't that be in the legal department budget? Why is it buried in?
Two reasons. Number one, these are,
risk management?
I mean, they have their regular work to do, and these are unusual. Number two, often a whole bunch of people are sued. So in one case, police officers, individual people working for the city, and the same lawyer, the one lawyer, and the lawyers themselves have been sued. So they need lawyers, everybody needs lawyers, and one lawyer usually cannot represent more than one or two people because there might be, they're concerned about potential conflicts. So when the lawyers get sued, you got to have other lawyers to represent them. Or when the police officers get sued, In this case, you know, one lawyer is representing the city plus 2 police officers, another lawyer is representing a couple of the lawyers, you know, it goes on and on. But that's just one example.
All right. It just seems bizarre to bury
Yeah,
this.
well, it is. You're right. It's
I mean,
bizarre,
I don't
but-
understand why it can't be in the legal department
Well, they
budget
can't
as-
represent themselves, and...
But it's an outside service, isn't it? You can't
Yeah.
have outside services?
Yeah,
with-
these are outside services.
I'm not sure why that can't be within the legal department budget. It just almost looks like it's being hidden. On page 93, this is assessing. I get an opportunity to ask this. It talks about fiscal year 25 objectives and fiscal year 24 highlights and accomplishes. And on fiscal year 24, it talks about began a statistical revaluation in 2024. And then it talks about completing the statistical revaluation calendar year 2024. So the question is, can you explain exactly what that is? Is that commercial or residential, and how does that affect?
Everything. It's everything.
And can you explain what you're doing?
Can I explain what?
Can you summarize or paraphrase what that task actually is and how it affects us?
Yes. Now, the assessing, Tim Cummings left thinking that all these questions had already been asked. But in general, a statistical, I mean, there are 2 generally types of assessments. There's the full measure and list. People go out and look at all the properties. A statistical revaluation has to do with an examination of trends within the community and a reallocation of values based upon what the assessors see in the statistics. And the reason that is there is that the property values are changing or have been changing very rapidly. And as you saw in the last revaluation, because 4 years went by between revaluations, the impact on homeowners was significant. So, because the value of the homes went up so much over 4 years, so the effort there is to do it more often, so that the adjustments are not as severe. And whether that's up or down, to sort of even out the process so that a lot of changes are not accumulated over more than 2 years.
So does this summarize that in fiscal year the end of fiscal year 2025, everyone's home, every residential and commercial property could potentially be reassessed?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. You have staff to do that now in the assessing department?
It's done by an outside contractor.
Oh, okay. On page 103, other general government, appropriations detail is a line item for rent, Nashua Center for the Arts, like $600K. Can you explain who we're paying rent to?
Well, there is rent, but there is an offsetting distribution that comes, and so the net is basically zero.
Where is that in here? Why are we paying it and then getting it back?
Because now, you've heard about these new market tax credits. There's some disagreement about that. But what that got for the city is we brought in $2.4 million of outside revenue that otherwise might have been spent by the taxpayers. So, you know, to me, $2.4 million is a lot of money. It's worth doing. But federal regulation, so we have to meet the requirements of new market tax credit, which is a federal treasury program. And to meet those requirements required a lot of experts and, you know, consultants. And they had to set up a certain structure of the transaction to qualify it to get the $2.4 million. So that is the basic answer.
So it was part of the new market credit
Yeah.
regulations.
Yes.
That you had to somehow set up this rental agreement.
Yeah, rent and then a distribution to offset it, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Now, at the end of 7 years, the city can, but there's pros and cons, which are more than we can get involved, discuss right now. But there are pros and cons. The city can terminate the transaction and just take over the ownership, and these complications would all go away. But there are pros and cons to that, and that will have to be decided, at year 7, and we're into it a couple of years now.
I had a question on the last question is the FTEs on page 274, specifically those under assessing.
This is what?
On page 274, the FTEs under Department Assessing.
Yeah.
It's got a total of 7.5 FTEs for
Yeah.
assessing.
Yeah.
And it's got all these titles. And I don't know whether this was addressed or not earlier, but are you actually staffed to these levels with these positions?
I think there's a couple of open jobs, but it would have been better. When the people that could answer this specifically were here and we were talking about assessing, if this had come up, they could have answered. But they're not here now, and...
So you're not staffed to this level yet?
Probably
in
not.
assessing?
No, I don't believe we are.
Is it planned to staff to this level?
Yes.
Okay. And the last thing is, if you look at, there's one line item, it's called Assessor Temp, 0 FTEs, but there's a cost associated with that.
I think that's a contract.
So why would it be 0? That's not 1?
It's an outside contract. So it's not actually an employee, I believe is the answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions that were forgot before, and please ask specific questions.
Actually, I missed the education section, so it's really not a missed, I just missed the whole section. And I just would like to ask, based on the 4th page of the handout I gave earlier, that the last page has to do with education. I hope, and this is probably not something you can answer tonight, but I hope as you do budgets, and I believe there's no one here from the education department, which seems strange to me since it's 70%.
Now, they were here.
Salary and
They were here.
Okay.
And then education was called. No one asked anything, so they left.
Okay. I just hope someone will be able to answer why we keep increasing salaries, benefits, all of that, with the kind of statistics of failure that we have in our schools. And that is on your 4th page. And you can look it up yourself if you think I've got this wrong. I just would like someone to be able to answer that question before you budget again for increases. I know any job I've had, it's been based on performance, and if I had that kind of statistics for the performance in my work, I would not be getting a raise. In fact, I would be being let go.
Any other questions that were missed? Again, specific questions.
Lori Ortolano, yes, I wanted to address the $500,000 risk management has for legal costs that are going to go into the budget for this upcoming budget. And the city did a presentation on March 26th. It was led by the legal office, I think maybe you and Mr. Cummings, on costs. And I'm not a supporter of that money being allocated because I feel that the costs have been completely mismanaged. And I took all of the spreadsheet data that you had and I made a graph of the expenditures. And I don't know if you can see it from here, but it's, what's telling about this graph is the very first bar. And the bulk of the spending that was presented in the spreadsheet is this 00309 case that just came through the trial that had to do with records in economic development. At the time, $400,000 had been spent. I believe now we're crossing over $500,000 on that suit. And I don't understand why the Board of Aldermen and the city leaders went so heavy on outside counsel, because you've been very clear, Mr. Mayor, in this proceeding that I lose almost everything. And the data that was put up in that meeting showed that the city is batting 92% and Lori is batting 8%. So I'm a pretty solid loser at this game as a pro se litigant. I don't necessarily agree with your numbers, but they are your numbers. And since I am not a good performer, you know, I have to question why you would spend $500,000 on a case that involved meeting minutes and postings of notices. And the one area that really concerns me is the whole issue sort of started bubbling up in 2021 when I was trying to figure out what those 201 corps were for the Performing Arts Center that were approved by the board under RSA 162G. And it turned out that the bylaws written by the hired consultant, which was Attorney Kaminsky, he was given a contract for around 65 or 70 grand to assist with that, were written incorrectly. Now, I don't understand, we paid Attorney Kaminsky, I think his last check in March of 2021 because the deal closed in December of 2020. And then maybe 6 months later, I'm digging in trying to figure out whether these are public entities. And of course, you know, or certainly the legal office and Attorney Kaminsky know that the bylaws are wrong. I don't know, instead of why we didn't go back to Attorney Kaminsky and Drummond Woodsum and say, hey, we contracted you, we paid you 65 grand, these are wrong, fix them, you know, at no cost. But instead we, you know, McLean Middleton gets, retained to come on as the premier firm to represent this and do this work, which took an additional 2 years. And, you know, I'm going to tell you, there's no question, you're a lawyer. The longer things are drawn out, it becomes a billing bonanza. It's just the nature of it.
We're just arguing more about these right to know litigation. I mean, the easiest way to save legal fees is the person who brought all these lawsuits just drops them and we could save $500,000.
Well, it doesn't.
Number two.
Well, this one is done.
Number two, city volunteers were sued.
Well, I'm
city
a volunteer.
Volunteers were sued.
I'm a city volunteer doing this work. And, you know, that's an interesting
City
thing.
volunteers were sued, first time in history, and we had to provide legal counsel for them because we're not going to make them pay for their own legal fees when they're trying to do they're city volunteers, they're working on various commissions or boards or whatever, and they got sued. So we're going to represent them. And beyond that, I don't think we should discuss this case any further. This is in the court.
But you spent $500,000 in outside
Yeah,
fees.
I agree. It's absurd. The way to get rid of that money is to drop all these lawsuits that end up going nowhere. They go nowhere.
It's already spent. This case is done.
Well,
the case is
but there's
in
more.
the
There's more
judge's
money
hand.
coming. There's still pending lawsuits.
Well, the federal one stays
Excuse
exactly
me, you
where
don't
it
have a
is.
specific question. I asked you for a specific question, and we're getting
I
into a
did.
discussion. Yes. It's non-debatable.
Well, if Mr. Peeble has a question,
Would the
I'll
clerk please
defer.
call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien. Yes. Alderwoman Timmons. Yes. Alderman Moran. Yes. Alderman Thibodeau. No. Alderman Govea. No. Alderman Lopez. No. Alderman Sullivan. No. Alderman Senate. Alderman Jettie. Alderman Clee. Alderman Dowd.
No.
Alderman Kelly. Alderman Wilshire. Mr. Chair, you have 3 yeas, 10 nays.
Motion fails. Now, do you have a specific
Okay,
question?
I'll wrap it up because Mr. T-Boom would like to do this. But I think this kind of table that shows the spending and shows all the money spent, and you saying the solution is for you to drop the suits, that's not a realistic solution, and you know that. The one that was spent
Why?
$500,000 on,
Why? These cases go nowhere.
I
We
actually
just
think I've
grind
done better
away, we
than you
spend legal
present.
fees.
But, and you get to present it your way, but this isn't, is it debatable that I have to drop my suits?
The cases keep getting dismissed, and
You know,
get-
that's
you get-
not really
You get
true.
sanctioned, and, you know, they just go on.
Excuse
You've
me.
been sanctioned.
Excuse
You
me,
got
specific question, no debate.
Yeah,
Well,
let's
he's
stop.
debating me.
No, you started it.
Wait a minute.
I asked you for a specific question.
I came down here and said, why didn't
Ask
we?
a specific question.
Why didn't we go to Drummond Woodsum and Attorney Kaminsky and have them rewrite the bylaws? We paid them all the money.
I think we couldn't get in touch with them. But also, this is a good example of the waste of time and money in all this litigation. Yes, Kaminsky was an out-of-state lawyer who was an expert in New Market tax credits, but wasn't aware of the New Hampshire right to know law. And he prepared bylaws which authorized non-public meetings. And that's the point you're making. They authorized non-public meetings. It was boilerplate bylaws. But the issue is, the law says we can't hold non-public meetings. So it was said over and over and over, we're not going to hold non-public meetings. No, the bylaws doesn't require it, it just authorizes it.
But
So
essentially
wait,
you did
wait,
because
you
you didn't
asked,
notice.
You asked, and you don't like the answer, and you interrupt.
Well,
I
because
get.
you held non-public meetings, essentially. They weren't noticed.
So they made the point that we're not going to hold non-public meetings, regardless of what the bylaws say. They authorize it, but they don't require it, and so we're not going to have non-public meetings. And yet, with that practical answer, there's a major lawsuit because these bylaws say that they could do something that they're never going to do. And so we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars litigating this.
You didn't answer it until the suit was filed, sir.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So that was the issue.
There's
Okay,
never,
thank you.
there hasn't been a non-public meeting. This is what I mean about the waste of this money and all these lawsuits over these academic questions. It is, you're right, it's a waste of taxpayers' money, but when individuals, volunteers, and employees get sued, we have to provide counsel for them.
Brett Debo.
Again, specific questions.
Yeah, I hope you don't have a provide a lawyer for me. Yeah, I have the page I like, page 11. Incidentally, I found your quotation of 3.7% on page 9. I did find it. Page 11. There is a $59 million budget item. If 25, not discussed, called Special Revenue Funds. Why, Mr. Chairman? We have
Excuse me?
seen the time. How come we're not discussing on the budget Special Revenue Funds? 59 million bucks. 59 million bucks.
Why are you asking me the question? Ask the treasurer.
You're the chairman. Okay, well, who do I ask? Mr. Gibbons? You didn't do too well last time, so I hope you do better this time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
First of all, do you know what a special revenue fund is?
I think so.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, the
In the
grants.
city and school.
Yeah.
Largest one in the school is the food service. Those are all appropriated by the Board of Aldermen, and they're included in the spending cap.
That's how much, man. I'm referring to page 11, want to know why isn't the $59 million on the agenda, that's all. I didn't even have a comment. I have a comment on the grants, that's part of that. A big chunk of that is the grants now. Since you're now including grants in the budget, as of, what, a couple of years ago.
Correct.
But why is it not on the agenda, that's all. Simple yes or no. No debate. All right.
Might be likely that there was no questions last year, and the chairman of the budget committee decided not to put it on.
That's enough.
It's
So-
in the budget book, so you can ask any question you want.
No, I haven't read the budget book this year. I'm just wondering why it's not on the agenda, that's all. That's why I asked the chair who prepares the agenda. You used to have a very large agenda, now you got a very short agenda. So why isn't, no, I'm going to ask you again, why isn't that on the agenda? All right. By the way, I got to thank the alderman, 3 to 12. I don't know who the turkey is that wanted to eliminate. It was you, wasn't it?
Point of personal privilege. I made the motion to cool the temperature in the room. I did not think it would succeed. And I think it cools a bit.
All right, now we'll entertain a motion to table the budget, which is R 24057. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to table the budget.
The motion on the floor is to table the budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Budget's back on the table. And I need an motion, Alderman O'Brien.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, the motion on the floor is to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 9:45 for adjourned.
Oh, you're watching it. I checked the score.
Okay.